Good morning, Year 12. In today's lesson, we're going to investigate our reducing balance loans further, and in particular, we're going to look at how the interest rate and the repayment amount affect the time to repay the loan. Before we go through these notes here, I just want to use an Excel example to work out how those two different factors are going to influence or affect how long it takes us to repay a loan. This Excel spreadsheet is in OneNote, so if you'd like to access it and play around with it, you're welcome to. So here we've got a principal of $10,000 on our loan. The annual percentage interest rate is 10%, and the number of compounds per year is 1, so it's a compounding annually situation, and they're repaying $1,500. If we have a look at the table of values down here, we can see that initially they start with a balance of $10,000. And at their first repayment, which is $1,500, the interest that they're charged is $1,000. That's simply the 10% of the balance of our loan, $10,000, gives us the $1,000. So out of this $1,500 repayment that they've made, $1,000 of that is going towards interest, which leaves $500 of that $1,500 to reduce the principal or the balance of our loan. And so you can see there that our loan balance has reduced by $500. We could have also worked out this balance by doing what we have done in our previous lesson, where we took the balance of the loan of $10,000, we added the interest of $1,000 and subtracted the repayment of $1,500. That would have given us the same answer here. As we continue following that same process down all of these repayments, we can see, as we did last lesson, that the amount of interest paid is decreasing over time. So when we get down to here, we're only paying $428 interest compared to $1,000 interest up here. We can also see that the opposite is happening with our principal reduction. So with our first payment, our principal only reduced by $500, but as we move down, that amount is increasing. So when we get down to a situation down here, we find that out of our $1,500 payment, only $428 of that is going towards paying interest, and the remaining just over $1,000 of that is reducing the principal. So we start to pay the loan off much more quickly when we get down to this situation where more of our repayment is going towards principal rather than being used with interest. And the reason that's happening is because our loan balance has decreased substantially, and therefore the amount of interest that we're charged has decreased as well. The key to paying off a home loan then quickly is to be able to reduce the balance of this loan quickly so that less of our repayment is going towards interest and more of it is going towards our principal reduction. So let's have a look at what happens to the length of the loan, the term of the loan, if we change the annual percentage interest rate. We can see here under these conditions that this loan is being repaid after 12 payments. And we know from our work last lesson that this last payment would need to be reduced. It wouldn't be the full $1,500, but that they would make a payment there in the 12th repayment. If I change this annual percentage interest rate to, let's say, 5%, so I'm decreasing it to 5%, we can see here that our loan is now paid off in 9 repayments. And once again, that last repayment would be adjusted because we wouldn't need the full $1,500. The reason that the term of the loan has decreased is because if we look up here, the amount of interest we're paying has decreased because we're now only charged 5% instead of 10%. So out of my $1,500, only $500 is going to interest and $1,000 is going towards reducing the principal. So that principal is reducing more quickly, causing us to repay the loan in a quicker time. So when our interest rate decreases, we can see that the term of the loan also decreases. That's based on the assumption that the repayment amount stays the same, which might not be what happens in real life. But if the repayment amount stays the same, and the interest rate decreases, then the term of the loan will decrease. So back to our 10%, and we know there that it's being paid off in 12 repayments. If I were to increase that interest rate to 13%, for example, we can see here that after those 12 repayments, I still owe $4,800 on my loan. So I'm just over halfway to paying back my loan in terms of the principal of $10,000 has gone just under that $5,000 mark. So obviously, with that increase in the interest rate, the term of the loan is going to increase as well. It's going to take us longer to pay off the loan. Once again, that's based on the assumption that the repayment amount stays constant. In real life with home loans, if your interest rate increases, you'll find that the bank will send you a letter and say your repayment amount needs to increase as well, so that the term of your loan stays constant. But if your repayment amount were to stay constant, that's how the changes to the interest rate will affect the term of the loan. The other thing we need to look at is how the repayment amount affects the time to repay the loan. So what if I were to change this repayment amount from $1,500, let's say, to $1,700? We can see there, as we'd expect, that the term of the loan is decreasing, so it's now only taking us 10 months to repay the loan. Because I'm putting more money into that loan, the interest hasn't changed in this first payment because it's still 10% of the $10,000. So that means all of that extra money, that extra $200 that I put into my repayment, all of that has gone towards reducing the principal. When that principal is reduced faster, we know we'll be paying less interest the next time, which means that once again, our balance on our loan is going to reduce more quickly. The opposite is going to happen, so I'll go back to my $1,500, and now the opposite is going to happen if I were to decrease my loan to, let's say, $1,300. Sorry, my repayment, not my loan. If I decrease my repayment to $1,300, we can see here after 12 repayments that I'm still owing $3,600 almost. So it's going to increase the amount of time it takes me to repay the loan. That's really important that you have an understanding of how changing these parameters here will affect your home loan and how long it takes you to repay the loan. And also we're going to investigate today this amount of interest that we pay has been changing when we've been changing those numbers as well. And that's an important thing for us to be able to work with. So if we have a look at the notes that you've been given, this just sums up what we've just gone through. If we increase the interest rate, generally that will lengthen the term of the loan, of course assuming that the repayments remain the same. And if we lower the interest rate, then that's going to shorten the term of the loan under that same assumption. How is the repayment amount going to affect the time to repay the loan? If we increase the repayment amount, generally that means the loan is going to be repaid in a shorter amount of time, and when loans are repaid in a shorter amount of time, that means that we're paying less interest overall. The second thing we need to look at in today's lesson is how we can work out the total interest that is paid. If I just go back to my spreadsheet here, back to the original conditions that we had, because we know that in a reducing balance loan, we are only paying interest on the balance of the loan at that time, we can see here that the interest changes every payment. In order to work out the total amount of interest we've paid over a loan, we would be required to work out each of those individually and add them all together. Now, if I had something like this where I only had 12 repayments to pay the loan back, then that's doable. But if I had a home loan where I had 30 years of repayments, that might be happening every fortnight. Creating this table without the use of a spreadsheet like Excel is going to take us far too long. So let's look at how we could get around that. This formula here that I've given you, it is not on your formula sheet, so you'll need to understand and be able to use it. In a loan, the total interest that you pay is equal to the total repayments that you make minus the reduction in the principal. So if we're talking about a point in time where your loan is paid off fully, then the reduction in the principal is the whole principal because you now owe nothing on the loan. But if we're talking about a point in time in your loan where perhaps we're talking about how much interest we may have paid up until this point here in our loan, then we're looking for what reduction have we seen in the balance of our loan? What did it start at and what is it at now? So that we can see how much of the repayments we've made are actually principal. Because the rest of the repayments that have been made that are not principal must be the interest. Let's look at how it works with a couple of examples. Lucy repays a $40,000 loan over 10 years with monthly repayments of $480. Calculate the total amount of interest she pays over the term of the loan. So we know that over those 10 years, $480 times 12 months in a year times 10 years, she's paid back $57,600. But she only borrowed $40,000. So why has she paid back extra? She's paid back extra because we know when we repay loans, we have to pay back the principal that we borrow and we have to pay back the interest charge as well. So the interest is going to be her repayments minus the principal because she's fully repaid this loan. So her reduction in principal is the whole $40,000 since she now owes nothing on the loan. So $57,600 minus the $40,000, her interest is $17,600. The second example, Alistair needs to borrow $20,000. His bank charges 7% per annum reducible interest calculated quarterly. He makes quarterly repayments of $400. Part A is to calculate the balance of the loan after 1 year. So we're going to use our knowledge of our recurrence relations here. I've set up our recurrence relation for this loan. It's compounding quarterly, so I've got my R value of 1.0175 times AN minus my payments of $400, and my initial value is $20,000. Starting with $20,000, following my recurrence relation, this is all work we covered last lesson, and I'm generating there, I've generated the first 4 terms here, first 4 quarters, because 4 quarters brings me to 1 year, which is what they wanted in the question. So at the end of 1 year, he still owes $19,794.69. Part B is to calculate the amount of interest that he's paid during that first year. So we are going to say here that we know he started with a $20,000 loan and he now owes this amount of money, $19,794.69. So the reduction in his principal, if I subtract those two, I can see that his principal has reduced by $205.31. The amount he owes the bank has gone down by $205. When I look at his total repayments though, he paid 4 repayments of $400, so he's actually paid back $1,600, but only $205 has come off the balance of his loan. The rest of that repayment is the interest charge. So the interest is the repayments minus the reduction in the principal, the $1,600 minus the $205.31 gives us the amount of interest that he has had to pay. That's the end of today's lesson. On OneNote there are a few questions from the textbook and there's also a short worksheet for you to complete as well. The reason that there are some worksheets throughout this section is that the textbooks don't always cover everything that we need to do. So we've added in a few extra questions to make sure that we are covering all of the content that is outlined in your syllabus.